The Sega SG-1000, released in 1983, may not have achieved the same fame as its competitors, but it boasted an impressive collection of racing games that showcased the system's capabilities. Here we are going to take a nostalgic look through every racing game that helped to define the console. Monaco Grand Prix would be one of the earliest racing experiences on the platform, delivering a straightforward top-down action racing setting. The SG-1000 version stayed faithful to its arcade roots, featuring the classic Monaco circuit with tight responsive controls and satisfying collision mechanics. But on the bad side, with extremely simple graphics, even by early 80s standards and minimal gameplay variety, did leave it lacking when you compare it to the arcade original. But at the same time, this is also one of the earliest editions that still remains one of the closest additions to that arcade original experience. Pacco would be a Pac-Man inspired racing hybrid that tasked players with collecting items while avoiding obstacles on a racetrack. The SG-1000 version featured colourful graphics and unique maze-like track designs, with innovative concepts that blended racing with collection mechanics, but often felt confusing with the objectives and structure, and the steep learning curve that alienated traditional racing fans. This version still remains as one of the most relatively rare games that can be found on the system. Originally a Namco arcade title, Rally X combined racing with strategic flag collection while avoiding enemy cars. The SG-1000 port maintained most of the original's gameplay elements, with addictive risk-reward mechanics and excellent maze-like track design, but the bad points, with occasionally unresponsive controls during crucial moments and repetitive sound effects, impaired the experience for many. There would be a later, improved version on the Nintendo NES that offered slightly improved visuals and similar gameplay. Challenge Derby is a horse racing simulator that stands out as one of the more unique entries in the SG-1000's racing catalogue. Players bet on and control horses in various race conditions, which has surprisingly deep betting mechanics and multiple race types to keep things interesting, but the repetitive gameplay and limited visual variety through longer sessions can feel monotonous. It was an unusual concept for the time, but also demonstrated the vast array of ideas that were possible on systems even during this generation. Road Fighter, Konami's vertical scrolling racer, challenged players to reach checkpoints before running out of time and fuel. The SG-1000 version delivered solid arcade racing style action with multiple car types. The excellent pacing and genuine tension as fuel depletes will definitely keep you on your toes, but the punishing difficulty spikes and limited continue options made it one of the most difficult games on the console to play during its time. There were many other versions of this game that were added to other systems around that time, with a later, more visually enhanced port on the Sega Master System under the name of Action Fighter. Hang On 2 would be the second game in Sega's popular arcade motorcycle racing series, and this sequel brought even more high-speed bike racing action to home consoles. But the SG-1000 version featured scaled-back graphics but maintained the core gameplay loop, with an excellent sense of speed and intuitive leaning mechanics. But the significant visual downgrades from the arcade original and limited track variety presented somewhat of a lesser experience, but due to the capabilities of the console it needed to be done. But still, it presented a really good representation of being able to play arcade games on the home console, which would later be improved with the later Master System version offering improved graphics and additional content. GP World is a Formula 1 inspired racer that attempted to capture the excitement of Grand Prix racing. The SG-1000 version featured multiple tracks and weather conditions, which was ambitious for its time, with varied track designs and responsive controls to make for more engaging racing. But the choppy frame rates during busy sections and overly punishing difficulty curve resulted in the game losing a lot of its original charm. But it did present some plus points, with the visual quality on display, showcasing the overall technical performance of the system that was able to push beyond the limits of what else was out there at the time. If anything, it's one of the best looking racing games of that generation. Zippy Race, also known as Motor Race USA in some regions, being a motorcycle racer that emphasised high-speed gameplay across American-themed tracks. The SG-1000 version featured smooth scrolling and detailed bike sprites, with immersive technical performance and satisfying speed sensation, but limited track variety and occasionally cheap AI behaviour would hamper the experience. There would be another version of this game also released later on the Nintendo Game Boy that offered similar gameplay features but reduced visual fidelity. Safari Race is a very unique off-road rally racing game set in the African landscapes, featuring animals as obstacles rather than other racers. The SG1000 version showcased creative track design and unusual hazards, with distinctive themes and creative obstacles that added so much variety to keep races unpredictable. But the awkward collision detection and inconsistent difficulty balancing presented many challenges and frustrations to players, which weren't always a positive thing. But visually, it's still one of the better looking games on the SG1000, and it is still worth a try. The racing games shown here represent the SG1000's ambitious attempt to cover every race and subgenre imaginable. While technical limitations held back some ambitious concepts, each title offered unique elements that would influence future racing games. For retro gaming enthusiasts, these titles provide fascinating glimpses into early racing design philosophy and Sega's willingness to experiment with unconventional concepts. The SG1000's racing library may lack the polish of later systems, but its creativity and variety established foundations that would echo throughout Sega's future racing endeavours, and we would see that on later consoles, which you can check out in this next video.